The chandelier cast 1,000 fractured rainbows across the marble floor of the Grand Palazzo Hotel, where Milan's elite gathered beneath ceilings painted by masters long dead. Isabella D'Angelo stood near the towering windows, her emerald gown cascading over the gentle swell of her 5-month pregnancy, her hand resting protectively over the life growing inside her. Across the ballroom, through the sea of diamonds and designer suits, she watched her husband, Salvatore D'Angelo, the most feared mafia boss in northern Italy, place his hand on the small of another woman's back. The gesture was intimate. The same way he once touched her. The blonde beside him laughed, leaning into him, and the room erupted in applause for the charity donation he'd just announced. Isabella's heart didn't break. Shattered. Silently. Completely. She looked down at the wedding ring on her finger. The 3-carat diamond he'd slid onto her hand 6 years ago with promises of forever. Slowly, deliberately she twisted it off. The metal was still warm from her skin as she slipped it into her clutch. No tears. No scene. Just a decision that would change everything. Please like, share and subscribe. The evening had begun like so many others in their marriage, with Isabella preparing alone while Salvatore attended to business that never seemed to end. She had stood before the full-length mirror in their bedroom at the D'Angelo estate, smoothing the emerald silk over her growing belly, wondering if tonight might be different. If tonight he might look at her the way he used to. 6 years ago, Salvatore D'Angelo had pursued her with the intensity of a man who conquered everything he desired. She had been 23, a curator at a small art gallery in Florence, completely unaware that the tall, devastatingly handsome man who kept returning to study the Renaissance paintings was actually studying her. When he finally introduced himself, his dark gray eyes had held a warmth she would later learn he showed to no one else. "You explain art like you're in love with it," he had said, his voice low and intimate despite the public setting. "I am," she had replied simply. "I want to know what it feels like," he had murmured, "to be something you love." She should have run. Everyone warned her about the D'Angelo family, about the darkness that surrounded their empire. But Salvatore had shown her a different side, gentle, protective, almost tender in his devotion. He had married her in a cathedral filled with white roses, his large hands trembling slightly as he held hers, the tattoo on his knuckles spelling honor real, true honor, as he promised to love her until his last breath. Now, 5 years, 7 months and 13 days later, Isabella watched those same hands rest on another woman's hip. The limousine ride to the gala had been silent. Salvatore had been on his phone the entire time, his jaw tight, the Italian script tattooed on his neck, Al Sang Comanda, visible above the collar of his perfectly tailored black suit. Blood commands. The family motto that governed his every decision. She had tried to reach for his hand, wanting to share her excitement about the baby's latest ultrasound, but he had shifted away without looking up. "Salvatore," she had said softly. "The doctor said we're having a—" "Not now, Isabella." 3 words. 3 words that had become the summary of their marriage over the past year. When they arrived at the Grand Palazzo Hotel, he had helped her from the car, manners so ingrained they were automatic, but his attention was already scanning the crowd. Looking for someone. She had thought it was business. She had thought it was always business. Then she saw her. Valentina Morelli descended the hotel steps like a goddess expecting worship. Platinum blonde hair swept over one shoulder, a red dress that left little to imagination, diamonds dripping from her ears and throat. She was everything Isabella was not. Tall where Isabella was average, sharp where Isabella was soft, hungry where Isabella was content. Had been content. Salvatore's entire demeanor changed the moment Valentina approached. His shoulders relaxed. His stern mouth curved into something resembling a smile. And when he introduced them, "Isabella, this is Valentina, she's been consulting on the new development project." There was a flicker of something in his gray eyes that Isabella had not seen directed at her in months. Guilt. The evening progressed with Isabella standing on the periphery of her own life. She watched Salvatore and Valentina move through the crowd together, watched them laugh at private jokes, watched him pour champagne for the other woman while Isabella's sparkling water sat untouched on a passing waiter's tray. No one offered her refreshment. No one spoke to her beyond the required pleasantries owed to a mafia boss's wife. She had become invisible in plain sight. It was Marco Bellandi who finally approached her, his weathered face etched with concern. Salvatore's right-hand man for over 15 years, Marco had always treated Isabella with genuine warmth, a rarity in their world of calculated alliances. "Signora D'Angelo," he said, positioning himself beside her. "You should be sitting. The baby. The baby is fine, Marco." His dark eyes followed her gaze across the ballroom to where Salvatore was now leaning close to Valentina, whispering something that made the blonde throw her head back in theatrical laughter. "He doesn't know what he's doing," Marco said quietly. "Doesn't he?" The scar over Marco's left eyebrow twitched, a tell Isabella had learned to read over the years. He was angry. And frightened. "I've tried to speak with him, Signora. Many times. But he's not himself lately." Isabella finally turned to look at the man who had become something like a friend in her isolated existence. "He's exactly himself, Marco. He's the man who takes what he wants when he wants it and discards what no longer interests him. I was simply foolish enough to believe I was different." "You're different. If he could just—" "Please," she said, and her voice cracked on the single syllable. "Please don't." Marco fell silent. Together they watched the charity auction proceed. Together they watched Salvatore win an obscenely expensive painting, a Renaissance piece Isabella would have loved, and present it to Valentina like a trophy. The applause was still echoing when Isabella removed her wedding ring. She moved through the crowd with the quiet grace she had perfected over years of existing in dangerous spaces. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. In a room full of predators, the pregnant wife of the most powerful man present should have been the most protected person there. Instead she walked out alone. The night air of Milan hit her face like a blessing, cool and clean after the suffocating atmosphere inside. She had taken only a few steps toward the line of waiting cars when she heard footsteps behind her. "Isabella." She froze. Not at the voice, she didn't recognize it, but at the tone. It was too familiar. Too intimate for a stranger. She turned to find a man emerging from the shadows of the hotel entrance. He was older than Salvatore, perhaps mid-40s, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that held the cold calculation of someone who had ordered deaths without flinching. "We haven't been formally introduced," he continued, stepping into the light. "I'm Vincenzo Ferraro." The name sent ice through her veins. For the family that had been locked in a cold war with the D'Angelos for 3 generations. The enemy. "You're a long way from Napoli," she managed. Vincenzo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Business brings me north. And curiosity." He tilted his head, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "I wanted to see for myself the woman who tamed Salvatore D'Angelo. Who convinced the most ruthless man in Italy to marry for love instead of alliance. I don't think I convinced him of anything." "No." Vincenzo's gaze dropped to her visible pregnancy, then to her left hand, specifically to her bare ring finger. "Trouble in paradise, Signora D'Angelo? My marriage is none of your concern. On the contrary." He stepped closer and Isabella instinctively stepped back, her hand pressing protectively over her belly. "Your marriage has been my concern since the day it happened. You see, there was an agreement between our families. A pact arranged by our fathers before their deaths. Salvatore was supposed to marry my sister. Unite the territories. End the bloodshed." Isabella's heart was pounding now. "I don't know anything about—" "Of course you don't. Salvatore made sure of that. He met you, became obsessed with you, and threw away decades of negotiation for what he called love." Vincenzo's voice dripped with contempt. "My sister died heartbroken a year after your wedding. Overdose, they said. I know better. Salvatore D'Angelo killed her as surely as if he'd pulled the trigger himself." "I'm sorry for your loss," Isabella whispered, "but I had nothing to do with—" "Oh, I know." Vincenzo's smile turned predatory. "You're the innocent in all this. The pure, beautiful girl he chose over duty and honor. But innocence doesn't protect you from becoming collateral damage, Signora. And from what I witnessed tonight, your husband has already forgotten your value." A black car pulled up to the curb and Vincenzo moved toward it with the casual confidence of a man who feared nothing. "A word of advice," he called over his shoulder. "When Salvatore inevitably comes crawling back, remember this conversation. Remember that he has destroyed everyone who ever loved him. And remember that I am always watching." The car disappeared into the Milan traffic, leaving Isabella standing alone on the sidewalk, trembling. She didn't return to the gala. Instead, she found her driver waiting in the D'Angelo limousine, gave him instructions to take her home, and spent the entire ride staring at the wedding ring in her palm. 6 years. 6 years of loving a man who had transformed from the passionate suitor who couldn't bear to be apart from her to the cold stranger who couldn't bear to look at her. She had made excuses for his distance. The pressures of business, the threats from rivals, the weight of leadership. She had told herself that his late nights and distracted silences were the price of the life they led. She had been lying to herself for so long that the truth felt like a physical blow. The D'Angelo estate rose before her like a mausoleum, 30,000 square feet of Renaissance architecture filled with priceless art and aching emptiness. Isabella had spent years trying to make it a home. She had hung family photos that Salvatore never looked at. She had filled rooms with flowers that he never noticed. She had prepared his favorite meals that he ate in silence before disappearing into his office. And now she was carrying his child. A child he hadn't truly acknowledged beyond a curt nod when she'd shared the news 3 months ago. "We'll need to increase security," he had said. "Not congratulations. Not I love you. Just logistics." Isabella climbed the grand staircase alone, her hand trailing along the marble banister. Their bedroom, no, his bedroom that she happened to sleep in, was dark and cold. She didn't turn on the lights. Instead, she sat at the vanity where she had made herself beautiful for a man who no longer saw her, and she let herself cry for the first time in months. The tears came silently, the way she had learned to grieve in this house. Noise drew attention. Weakness drew exploitation. In the world of the D'Angelo family, emotion was a vulnerability that enemies could use against you. But there were no enemies here. Just a pregnant woman mourning a marriage that had died long before tonight. She was still crying when she heard the front door open. Voices drifted up from the foyer, Salvatore's deep baritone and something lighter. Female. Isabella moved to the bedroom door on instinct, opening it just a crack. "Shouldn't be here." Salvatore's voice. But not cold. Not distant. Warm the way it used to be with her. "Your wife left." Valentina's laugh echoed off the marble. "She won't be back for hours. Don't you want to show me your home?" Silence. Then footsteps moving toward the east wing. Toward the private gallery where Isabella had curated Salvatore's art collection with love and care. Isabella closed the door. Her hands were shaking as she pulled a suitcase from the closet. She moved mechanically, packing only what she needed. Clothes, documents, the jewelry that had been gifts from her own family before her marriage. She left everything Salvatore had given her. The diamonds. The designer gowns. The hollow tokens of a love that no longer existed. She left the wedding ring on his pillow. It took her 20 minutes to pack her life into 2 suitcases. It took her another 5 to write a note she would never send. And it took her exactly 60 seconds to walk out of the D'Angelo estate, climb into the car she had purchased with her own money 3 years ago. Money Salvatore didn't know about from investments he'd never bothered to question, and drive away from the only home she'd known for 6 years. In her rearview mirror, the mansion's windows blazed with light. She didn't look back. The next morning, Salvatore woke with a pounding headache and a vague sense of wrongness. He reached across the bed automatically, searching for Isabella's warmth, and found only cold sheets. He sat up slowly, his eyes adjusting to the light streaming through curtains that Isabella always kept drawn. The room felt different. His gaze swept the space, cataloging details he normally ignored. The vanity cleared of her cosmetics. The closet doors opened to reveal gaps where her clothes should be. The wedding ring on his pillow gleamed in the morning sun. For a long moment, Salvatore simply stared at it. 3 carats. Flawless. He had selected it himself from a jeweler in Antwerp, paying twice the asking price because he couldn't wait for the normal shipping time. He had been so eager to claim her. So desperate to put his ring on her finger before she realized she deserved better than a man with blood on his hands. Now that ring lay abandoned on Egyptian cotton. He reached for his phone, his movements sharp with an anxiety he refused to acknowledge. The call went straight to voicemail. Her voice, soft, professional, the greeting she used for people who weren't him, asked him to leave a message. "Isabella." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Call me back." He hung up. Stared at the phone. Called again. Voicemail. "Where are you?" He was on his feet now, pulling on pants with one hand while the other gripped the phone like a lifeline. "Isabella, this isn't funny. Call me back. Now. The third call went unanswered. The fourth. The fifth. By the 10th, Salvatore was standing in the middle of their bedroom, his chest heaving, the tattoos on his forearms stark against his pale skin as his hands clenched into fists. Honor real. True honor. The words branded into his knuckles seemed to mock him. Marco arrived within the hour, summoned by a text message that contained only 2 words. She's gone. Her car is missing, Marco reported, his face carefully neutral. The night staff said she returned from the gala around 10, stayed for approximately 30 minutes and left. She didn't speak to anyone. Didn't take any security. Find her. Boss. Find her, Marco. The older man hesitated, a rare occurrence that made Salvatore's stomach clench. There's something else. One of our men spotted Vincenzo Ferraro at the hotel last night, leaving around the same time as Signora D'Angelo. The world went red at the edges. What? I don't know if they spoke. I'm having our people pull security footage now. But if Ferraro approached her, if he threatened her. He's dead. Salvatore's voice was flat. Absolute. If he so much as looked at her, I will kill him with my own hands. I will kill everyone he loves. I will burn Napoli to the ground. Marco didn't flinch. He had heard these declarations before. Had helped carry them out. We'll find her, he said. She can't have gone far. But hours turned into days and days turned into a week, and Isabella D'Angelo had vanished as completely as if she had never existed. Salvatore tore Milan apart looking for her. He called in favors from every contact, threatened enemies and allies alike, spent more money than some countries' GDP on private investigators and surveillance technology. He discovered that she had withdrawn a significant sum from a personal account he hadn't known she had, 200,000 euros, accumulated over years from investments and small inheritances she had never mentioned. His wife had been preparing to leave him for years. The realization hit him like a bullet to the chest. He was sitting in his office at midnight, 8 days after she disappeared, when Marco knocked on the door. What? Salvatore's voice was hoarse from disuse. He had barely spoken since she left, communicating primarily through grunts and threatening glares. Marco entered carrying a manila envelope. His expression was grave. You need to see this. The envelope contained photographs. Clear, damning photographs of Salvatore and Valentina at the gala. His hand on her back, his head bent close to hers, her fingers resting on his chest. They looked like lovers. They looked like everything he had been telling himself they weren't. Where did these come from? Anonymous source. Sent to every major media outlet in Italy, along with financial records. Marco's voice was carefully controlled. Records showing that Valentina Morelli has been accepting payments from the Ferraro family for the past 18 months. She's not a business consultant, Salvatore. She's a spy. The photographs scattered across the desk as Salvatore's fist slammed down. And there's something else. Marco pulled a second set of documents from his jacket. Her real name isn't Valentina Morelli. It's Valentina Ferraro, Vincenzo's cousin. The woman you've been parading around Milan, the woman you brought into your home, she's been reporting your every move to your enemies. Salvatore didn't move. Couldn't move. He stared at the documents as if they were written in a language he no longer understood. Valentina had pursued him relentlessly for months, appearing at his meetings, finding reasons to be wherever he was, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm, making him feel powerful and desired and alive in ways he had forgotten he could feel. And he had fallen for it. Like a fool. Like a mark in his own con. The baby, he said suddenly. Isabella's baby. She's 5 months pregnant and she's out there alone and... He couldn't finish the sentence. The image of his wife, his pregnant wife, alone and unprotected while his enemies circled made him physically ill. We're still looking, Marco assured him. Every man we have. It's not enough. Salvatore was on his feet, pacing like a caged animal. Nothing is enough. He stopped. Swallowed. I need to find her. I need to explain. Explain what? Marco's voice was sharper than usual. Explain why you humiliated your wife at a public event. Explain why you brought another woman into her home while she was pregnant with your child. Explain why you stopped seeing her months ago. Salvatore turned slowly to face his most trusted advisor. Careful, Marco. No. The older man stood his ground, scar twitching. No, I won't be careful. I've watched you destroy the best thing that ever happened to you, and I've held my tongue because it wasn't my place. But now she's gone and you're acting like you don't know why, and someone needs to tell you the truth. And what is the truth? The truth is that you're a coward. Marco's words fell like stones. You built an empire on fear and violence, but you couldn't handle the terror of actually being loved. So you pushed her away. You made yourself cold and distant because feeling things made you vulnerable. And when Valentina offered you attention without attachment, you grabbed it because it was safe. Because she didn't love you. Because losing her wouldn't break you the way losing Isabella would. Salvatore's hands were shaking. The Roman warrior tattooed on his right forearm seemed to tremble with him, a symbol of conquest and power rendered meaningless by the truth of Marco's words. I never touched Valentina. His voice was barely audible. I need you to know that. It was never physical. I wouldn't. It doesn't matter. Marco's anger softened into something sadder. You touched her with your attention. With your time. With the warmth you denied your wife. Isabella saw you choose another woman over and over again, and she finally stopped hoping you would choose her. Salvatore sank into his chair. He looked at the wedding ring he had been carrying in his pocket for 8 days, taking it out to stare at it in the darkness, pressing it to his lips as if he could somehow reach her through the metal. How do I fix this? I don't know if you can. Marco moved to the door, then paused. But you can start by destroying the woman who helped destroy your marriage. And then you can spend the rest of your life trying to become the man Isabella believed you were when she said yes. The door closed behind him, leaving Salvatore alone with his guilt and his grief and the terrible dawning understanding of what he had lost. 200 miles away, in a small village on the coast of Tuscany, Isabella woke to the sound of waves. The cottage she had rented was modest by the standards she had grown accustomed to. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a terrace overlooking the sea. But it was hers. Paid for with her own money. Filled with silence that was peaceful rather than oppressive. She had been here for 8 days. 8 days of sleeping without waiting for Salvatore to come home. 8 days of eating when she was hungry instead of waiting for meals that were always interrupted by business. 8 days of crying and healing and trying to imagine a future that didn't include the man she had loved for 6 years. The baby kicked as she made her morning tea, and Isabella smiled despite herself. This child was the one good thing to come from her marriage. She would love this baby enough for 2 parents. She would give this child everything she had, every ounce of warmth and attention that Salvatore had denied her. He would be enough. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Not the phone Salvatore had given her. That one was at the bottom of the Mediterranean, tossed from a ferry on her journey south. This was a burner she had purchased with cash, given only to her sister in Rome and the lawyer she had retained before leaving Milan. The text was from the lawyer. Your husband's team has been inquiring about you through official channels. They've contacted your family, your former colleagues, even your doctors. I've filed injunctions where possible, but you should know he's looking hard. Also, the financial documents you provided have been verified. Valentina Morelli's connections to the Ferraro family are extensive. Do you want me to proceed with the media release? Isabella stared at the message for a long time. She had discovered Valentina's true identity by accident. 3 months ago she had gone to Salvatore's office to surprise him for lunch. A hopeless romantic gesture from a woman who still believed her husband might come back to her. She had found the office empty but his computer unlocked, and her eyes had caught on an email exchange that made her blood run cold. Financial transfers. Meeting locations. Code words. And a name, V. Ferraro. She hadn't confronted Salvatore. What would have been the point? He barely looked at her anymore. Instead, she had quietly gathered information. Photographed documents. Built a case that she had never intended to use. Until the gala. Until she watched her husband choose another woman in front of 500 witnesses. Until she realized that he had betrayed not only their marriage but their safety. Her fingers moved across the phone screen. Proceed with the release. But wait until tomorrow. I want to file the divorce papers first. The response came quickly. Are you certain? Once this goes public, there's no going back. Isabella set down the phone. Through the window, she could see the endless expanse of the Mediterranean, blue and gold in the morning light. She thought about the girl she had been when Salvatore first walked into her gallery, young and hopeful and so desperate to be loved that she had ignored every warning sign. She thought about the woman she had become in his house, smaller and quieter with each passing year, dimming her own light so his darkness wouldn't seem so absolute. And she thought about the mother she was about to become, responsible for a child who deserved to see what strength looked like. She picked up the phone again. I'm certain. The divorce papers arrived at the D'Angelo estate exactly 72 hours later. Salvatore was in the middle of a meeting, planning the systematic destruction of Valentina Morelli's life, when his attorney interrupted with an apologetic knock. This couldn't wait. The documents were official, thorough, filed in a jurisdiction that would make contesting them nearly impossible. And they were devastating in their simplicity. Isabella D'Angelo was requesting a divorce on grounds of abandonment and emotional cruelty. She was not seeking spousal support. She was not seeking a portion of his assets. She wanted nothing from him except her freedom and full custody of their unborn child. Full custody. The words blurred as Salvatore read them again. She was trying to take his child. His heir. The only part of her he would have left. Where was this filed? His voice didn't sound like his own. Tuscany. A small courthouse near Tuscany. Salvatore was on his feet, the papers crumpling in his grip. She's in Tuscany? We're narrowing down the location now. If we move quickly. Prepare my car. And Marco? He turned to his right-hand man who had been watching with an expression of grim satisfaction. Delay the release of the Valentina information. I need to handle this first. Marco's eyebrows rose. You want to protect the woman who? I want to destroy her publicly and completely, and I want to do it standing next to my wife. Salvatore's jaw was tight, the words grinding through clenched teeth. Isabella has information. Evidence. I saw it referenced in the divorce filing. Exhibits of financial malfeasance and conspiracy. She's been building a case for months and she's going to release it without me. Understanding dawned on Marco's face. She's going to expose Valentina herself. She's going to humiliate the woman who helped end her marriage, and she's going to do it alone because she doesn't trust me to do it for her. Salvatore's voice cracked. Because I've given her no reason to trust me. He was out the door before Marco could respond, the divorce papers still clutched in his hand like a death sentence. The drive to Tuscany took 4 hours. 4 hours of silence in the back of his car, staring at the papers that spelled the end of his marriage. 4 hours of imagining Isabella's face when she had written these words. 4 hours of understanding finally and completely what his distance had cost him. He remembered the first time he had seen her, standing in that Florence gallery, her face illuminated by the light from a stained glass window, explaining a Renaissance painting to a group of tourists with such passion that he had stopped mid-stride and simply stared. He had been so alive, so vibrant, so completely different from every calculating, ambitious woman in his world. He had pursued her with single-minded intensity because losing her had never seemed like a possibility. She had said yes to his proposal with tears in her eyes. She had stood beside him through violence and danger and loss. She had loved him when he gave her no reason to. And he had rewarded her with silence, with absence, with the slow, systematic starvation of everything that made her shine. The village appeared on the horizon as the sun began to set, a cluster of white buildings cascading down toward the sea. Salvatore's men had tracked her to a rental cottage on the northern edge, overlooking a small cove. He ordered the car to stop at the edge of the village. He would walk the rest of the way. This moment required more than his usual show of power. The cottage was small and perfect, exactly the kind of place Isabella would have chosen. Flowers bloomed in window boxes. A cat dozed on the terrace wall. And through the gauze curtains he could see her silhouette moving in the kitchen, her pregnant belly visible even in shadow. She was alive. She was safe. She was here. And she was filing for divorce. Salvatore climbed the stone steps to her front door, his heart pounding harder than it had before any battle, any negotiation, any kill. He raised his hand to knock. The door opened before his fist could land. Isabella stood before him in a simple cotton dress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her hazel eyes wide with shock that quickly hardened into something colder. How did you find me? I will always find you. The words came out rough, desperate. Isabella. Go away, Salvatore. He tried to close the door. He caught it with his hand, gently, careful not to force it, but firm enough to stop her retreat. Please. The word tasted foreign on his tongue. He couldn't remember the last time he had said please to anyone. Please, just let me explain. Explain what? Her voice was steady, but he could see the tremor in her hands. Explain why you brought your mistress into our home? Explain why you've spent months treating me like a stranger? Explain why I found evidence that the woman you've been parading around Milan is a Ferraro spy, and you were too obsessed with her to notice. I know. Salvatore's voice broke. I know everything. Marco showed me, the financial records, the family connection, all of it. I was a fool. I was worse than a fool. I was a monster. Isabella's eyes glistened with tears she refused to shed. You were my husband and you made me invisible. You made me feel like loving you was a burden. And when I tried to tell you about our baby, when I tried to share the joy of creating a life with you, you couldn't even look at me. I was afraid. The admission hung between them, raw and terrible in its honesty. Afraid of what? Isabella's laugh was bitter. You're the most powerful man in Italy. What could possibly frighten Salvatore D'Angelo? You. He stepped closer and she stepped back, and the distance between them felt like miles. You frighten me. The way I feel when I look at you frightens me. The knowledge that I would burn the world for you frightens me. So he swallowed hard. I created distance. I told myself it was protection. If I didn't let myself feel, no one could use you against me. And instead you used yourself against me. Isabella's hand moved to her belly, protective and instinctive. You broke my heart slowly, deliberately, over months and years. Do you know what that's like? To love someone who looks right through you? To wait every night for a husband who never comes? To carry his child while he gives his smiles to another woman? I never touched her. Salvatore's voice was desperate. I need you to believe me, I never touched Valentina. I was an idiot, I was blind, I gave her attention that belonged to you, but I never... It doesn't matter. Isabella's tears finally spilled over, tracking down her cheeks like condemnation. You touched me every night for 6 years and I still felt alone. You made love to me without seeing me. You shared my bed without sharing yourself. A physical affair would have been kinder. At least then I would have known what I was fighting. Salvatore's legs buckled. He found himself on his knees before her, the great Mafia boss brought low by the weight of his own failures. The tattoos on his arms, symbols of power and conquest, seemed to mock him as he reached for her hands. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate, pathetic, nothing compared to the pain he had caused. I'm so sorry, Isabella. I destroyed us. I destroyed the only good thing in my life because I was too much of a coward to let myself love you properly. And now it's too late. No. He gripped her hands tighter, his gray eyes burning into hers. It's not too late. It can't be. I'll do anything. I'll leave the family, I'll walk away from everything, I'll spend the rest of my life earning your forgiveness. You can't fix this with grand gestures, Salvatore. Isabella pulled her hands free. You can't buy my love back with promises and declarations. You had 6 years to love me quietly, consistently, in all the small ways that matter. And you chose not to. Then tell me how. He was begging now, a man who had never begged for anything in his life. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to prove that I've changed. I don't know if you can change. Isabella stepped back into her cottage, her hand on the door. I don't know if I want you to. I spent 6 years trying to love you enough for both of us. I'm tired, Salvatore. I'm tired of being the only one fighting for us. I'll fight now. He rose to his feet, desperate. I'll fight forever. Just give me a chance. No. The single word stopped him cold. The divorce papers are filed. My lawyer is preparing the next steps. Isabella's voice was flat now, exhausted. Tomorrow, the media will receive a comprehensive package documenting Valentina Ferraro's crimes against your organization. I've given them everything. The financial transfers, the meeting notes, the photographic evidence. She'll be exposed. Destroyed. Everything she tried to take from you will be returned. Isabella. I'm doing it for the baby. Her hand pressed against her belly. This child deserves a father who is safe from the enemies I helped expose. But that doesn't mean I want you back. It doesn't mean I forgive you. It means I'm strong enough to protect my family without needing you to do it for me. She began to close the door. I love you. The words burst from him like a confession, raw and uncontrolled. Isabella paused. For a single agonizing moment he saw something flicker in her eyes. Longing, grief, the ghost of the girl who had loved him without reservation. Then her face hardened. You should have said that a year ago. Or 5 years ago. Or any of the 1,000 nights I waited for you to come home and tell me I mattered. She took a shaking breath. Goodbye, Salvatore. The door closed in his face. Salvatore stood frozen on the doorstep as darkness fell around the Tuscan village, his world collapsing into the small space between a closed door and the sound of his wife's footsteps retreating. Inside the cottage, lights flickered on and off as Isabella moved through rooms he couldn't enter, preparing for a life he wouldn't share. Tomorrow, the woman who had betrayed them both would be destroyed by evidence his own wife had gathered. Evidence he should have found months ago if he hadn't been so blind. And somewhere in Milan, Vincenzo Ferraro was waiting, watching, planning his next move against a man whose empire was crumbling from the inside. The most powerful mafia boss in Italy had conquered cities, crushed enemies and built an empire on fear and blood. But he couldn't open a door. He couldn't reach his wife. He couldn't feel his child kick against his palm. And in approximately 18 hours, the secrets Isabella had gathered would explode across every news outlet in Italy, revealing not just Valentina's treachery, but the depth of Salvatore's failure to protect his own family. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that the evidence Isabella possessed contained one final revelation. One secret that would change everything. And Vincenzo Ferraro had already started moving. The night stretched endlessly over the Tuscan coast, but Salvatore didn't move from Isabella's doorstep. He sat on the cold stone steps, his tailored suit wrinkling against the rough surface, his gray eyes fixed on the cottage windows where shadows moved and lights eventually dimmed. He was in there. His wife. His pregnant wife. The woman he had driven away with his silence and his cowardice and his pathetic inability to love her the way she deserved. And she had closed the door in his face. Marco called 3 times. Salvatore ignored each one. His right-hand man would be panicking by now. The boss unreachable, the empire vulnerable, enemies circling. But for the first time in his life, Salvatore couldn't bring himself to care about business. The D'Angelo territory could burn. The alliances could crumble. None of it mattered if Isabella wasn't beside him. Around midnight, the cottage light in the bedroom went dark. Salvatore imagined her climbing into bed alone, her hand resting on her belly the way it had at the gala. He imagined the baby kicking against her palm, movements he should have felt months ago if he had ever bothered to reach for her. He had been in the same house, the same bedroom, and he had never once asked to feel his child move. The realization made him physically ill. He stayed until dawn began to paint the horizon pink and gold, until fishermen started emerging from the village homes with their nets and their thermoses of coffee. A few of them glanced at the well-dressed stranger sitting on the cottage steps, but no one approached. Something in his face, the hollow devastation, the dangerous stillness, kept them at a distance. When the first rays of sunlight hit Isabella's windows, Salvatore finally rose. His body ached from hours of immobility. His throat was raw from the salt air and the words he hadn't been able to say. But he couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until she understood that he wasn't going anywhere. He walked to the village's small cafe, purchased 2 coffees and a basket of pastries and returned to her door. He set the breakfast on her doorstep like an offering, like a prayer. Then he retreated to the low stone wall across the street and waited. An hour later the cottage door opened. Isabella appeared in a white linen dress, her dark hair braided loosely over one shoulder. She looked tired, circles under her eyes, a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there 6 years ago. But she was beautiful. So impossibly beautiful that Salvatore's chest ached with it. He saw the breakfast. Her eyes lifted to find him on the wall. For a long moment neither of them moved. Then Isabella picked up the coffee and pastries, retreated inside and closed the door without a word. Salvatore waited. The morning passed in silence. Around noon his phone buzzed with a message from Marco that he couldn't ignore. It's done. The Valentina evidence hit every major outlet an hour ago. All hell is breaking loose. Ferraro is making moves. You need to come back. Salvatore stared at the message, then typed a response. Handle it. 3 dots appeared as Marco composed a reply. Handle what, exactly? The entire operation is. Handle. Salvatore silenced his phone and returned his attention to the cottage. Inside, Isabella was watching the news coverage on her laptop, her hands trembling around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The headlines were everything she had hoped for and worse than she had imagined. Valentina Morelli exposed as Ferraro's spy, financial crimes revealed. D'Angelo empire rocked by infiltration scandal. The mistress who wasn't, platinum blonde beauty revealed as enemy agent. The photographs were everywhere. Valentina at parties, Valentina in meetings, Valentina with her hand on Salvatore's arm. Each image felt like a knife to Isabella's heart even now. Even knowing the truth. But buried in the coverage, in the financial documents she had provided, was something Isabella hadn't fully understood when she compiled the evidence. Valentina hadn't just been feeding information to Vincenzo Ferraro. She had been systematically transferring D'Angelo assets into offshore accounts controlled by the Ferraro family. Millions of euros, siphoned over 18 months through shell companies and fraudulent invoices. The D'Angelo empire wasn't just compromised, it was being slowly, methodically drained. And worse. Much worse. The evidence trail led to a final document Isabella had almost overlooked. A medical report. A private laboratory analysis dated 3 weeks ago. Valentina Morelli was pregnant. Isabella's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the tile floor. He barely heard it. Her eyes were fixed on the document, on the clinical words that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Patient. Morelli Valentina status. Pregnant, approximately 8 weeks requested action. Paternity analysis upon live birth notes. Patient requests expedited confirmation of father's identity. Father believed to be D'Angelo. Isabella's hand moved to her own belly where her child, Salvatore's child, kicked and tumbled in blissful ignorance. She had known about the emotional affair. She had suspected physical involvement despite her husband's denials. But this was something else entirely. This was a second family. A replacement for the wife who had become invisible. The cottage suddenly felt too small. The walls were closing in, the cheerful yellow curtains mocking her grief. Isabella grabbed her keys and her phone, desperate for air, for space, for anything other than the 4 walls that now felt like a prison. She threw open the front door. And found Salvatore still sitting on the wall across the street, exactly where he had been 4 hours ago. He rose immediately when he saw her face. Something was wrong. Something beyond their broken marriage, beyond the divorce papers, beyond everything that had passed between them. Isabella. He crossed the distance in seconds. What happened? What's wrong? She couldn't speak. She thrust her phone at him instead, the medical document still displayed on the screen. Salvatore's face went white. No. His voice was barely audible. No, this can't be. 8 weeks. Isabella's voice came out as a croak. She's 8 weeks pregnant. Which means... I never touched her. Salvatore's eyes were wild, desperate. Isabella, I swear to you on my mother's grave, on everything I have ever held sacred, I never touched Valentina Morelli. Not once. Not ever. Then explain this. Isabella grabbed her phone back, brandishing it like a weapon. Explain why she's requesting a paternity test. Explain why she believes you're the father. Explain. It's a lie. Salvatore's hands were shaking as he reached for her. It's another manipulation. Another Ferraro scheme. They're trying to... To what? Isabella stepped back, avoiding his touch. To destroy what's already destroyed? To end a marriage that I ended a week ago? What more could they possibly take from me, Salvatore? What more could you possibly take? I didn't do this. His voice cracked on the words. For the first time since she had known him, Salvatore D'Angelo looked like a man facing his own execution. I didn't do this, he repeated, his gray eyes boring into hers. I was a fool. I was blind. I gave her attention and time that should have been yours. But I never. He swallowed hard. The night of the gala. When you left. She came back to the estate with me. Isabella's heart stopped. She wanted to see the private gallery. I was drunk on champagne and self-pity, and I let her in. We looked at the paintings. We talked about art, about you actually, about how you had curated the collection. His voice turned bitter. She asked a lot of questions about you. I didn't think. You brought her to our gallery. Isabella's voice was flat. The space I created for us. The paintings I chose with love. And you shared it with her. I was a fool. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Salvatore's hands moved to grip her shoulders, but stopped just short of touching her. But I need you to believe me. After the gallery I showed her out. Marco can confirm he was there. He saw her leave. Alone. I went to our bedroom and found your ring and... His voice broke completely. And I have spent every moment since trying to understand what I destroyed. Isabella wanted to believe him. God help her, she wanted to believe that the man she had loved for 6 years wasn't capable of this final betrayal. But the evidence was on her phone. Clinical. Visual. Damning. It doesn't matter. The words cost her everything. Even if you're telling the truth, even if Valentina is lying about the pregnancy, it doesn't change anything. You still chose her over me. You still made me invisible in my own marriage. You still... A black SUV came screaming around the corner of the village street. Salvatore's instincts kicked in before his conscious mind caught up. He shoved Isabella behind him, his body becoming a shield as his hand moved to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. The SUV skidded to a stop. Doors flew open. And Marco Bellandi emerged, his face tight with urgency. We have a problem. I told you to handle it. This can't be handled from a distance. Marco's eyes flickered to Isabella, softening briefly before hardening again. Vincenzo Ferraro has made his move. He's taken Valentina into protective custody, his words, and he's threatening to go public with her pregnancy claim unless you meet with him. Tonight. Alone. Isabella felt Salvatore's entire body go rigid. Where? Milan. The old cathedral on Via dei Martiri. Midnight. Marco hesitated. There's more. He has video footage from the gala. From the private rooms. He's claiming it shows you and Valentina in a... It's fabricated. Salvatore's voice was ice. Whatever he has, it's been manufactured. I was never alone with her in any private room. Can you prove it? Silence. Isabella stepped out from behind her husband's protective stance. Her face was pale but determined, her hand pressed against her belly in the gesture that had become automatic. I can prove it. Both men turned to stare at her. The gala was held at the Grand Palazzo Hotel. I know the security director, Antonio Vasquez. He owed me a favor after I helped authenticate a painting for his daughter's wedding gift. Isabella's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I can get the unedited security footage. Every angle, every timestamp. If Salvatore is telling the truth about never being alone with Valentina, the cameras will show it. And if he's lying? Marco asked quietly. Isabella met her husband's eyes. Then at least I'll know. The drive back to Milan took 3 hours. Isabella sat in the back of Marco's SUV, her small suitcase retrieved from the cottage, her future more uncertain than ever. Salvatore had wanted to ride with her but she had refused. She needed space to think. Space to breathe. Space to decide what she believed. Instead, Salvatore followed in his own car. A convoy of D'Angelo vehicles stretching along the coastal highway like a funeral procession. She used the time to make phone calls. Antonio Vasquez was surprised to hear from her. They hadn't spoken in over a year, but agreed to help immediately when she explained what she needed. The unedited footage will take some time to compile, he warned. There are 17 cameras covering the private rooms alone. But I'll have everything ready by tonight. Thank you, Antonio. Signora D'Angelo. He hesitated. Is everything all right? The news coverage today. Everything is fine. The lie tasted like ash. I just need to know the truth. When she hung up, Marco glanced at her in the rearview mirror. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I've known Salvatore for 23 years. He has done terrible things. Unforgivable things. But he has never lied to me about women. And he has never ever looked at another woman the way he looks at you. Then why did he stop looking at me at all? Marco was silent for a long moment. Fear, he finally said. The same fear that drives all powerful men. The terror of losing control. Of being vulnerable. His eyes met hers in the mirror. You made him feel things he couldn't control. So he tried to stop feeling them. That's not an excuse. No. It's an explanation. And a warning. Marco's voice hardened. Vincenzo Ferraro knows exactly how to exploit this weakness. He's been planning this for years. Ever since Salvatore chose you over the arranged marriage with his sister. Everything that's happened, Valentina, the infiltration, the pregnancy claim, it's all been building toward this moment. What does he want? Destruction. He wants to take everything from Salvatore the way he believes Salvatore took everything from him. Marco's hands tightened on the steering wheel. And you, Signora, you and your baby, are the keys to that destruction. You're the proof that Salvatore has weaknesses. That he can be hurt. Isabella's hand moved to her belly. Inside the baby kicked, strong and insistent, demanding attention. He won't touch my child. The words came out with a ferocity that surprised her. For months she had felt weak. Invisible. Diminished by her husband's indifference. But something about the threat to her baby ignited a flame that had been dormant for too long. He won't touch my child, she repeated. And he won't use me to destroy Salvatore. No matter what happens between us, no matter whether I forgive him or not, I won't let our enemies use our pain against our family. Marco's eyes flickered with respect. You sound like a D'Angelo. I sound like a mother. Isabella's gaze moved to the window, watching the Italian countryside blur past. And God help anyone who threatens my child. They arrived in Milan as evening painted the city gold and gray. Isabella had expected to be taken to the D'Angelo estate, the mausoleum she had fled only 9 days ago, but Marco drove instead to a private penthouse in the financial district. It's a safe house, he explained. Unknown to our enemies. You'll be protected here while we handle Ferraro. Isabella's eyebrow rose. While you handle him. I thought I was providing the evidence. You'll review the footage here with a team of our analysts. If it confirms what Salvatore claims, I'll decide what to do with it. Isabella's voice was firm. This is my evidence. My proof. My choice. Marco hesitated then nodded. The penthouse was sleek and modern, all clean lines and expensive furnishings. It felt nothing like the Renaissance grandeur of the D'Angelo estate, and Isabella found herself grateful for the anonymity. Here she wasn't the Mafia boss's wife. She wasn't the abandoned woman. She was simply Isabella making choices about her own future. Salvatore arrived 20 minutes later, his suit rumpled from hours on the road, his face haggard with exhaustion and worry. He stopped in the doorway of the penthouse living room, drinking in the sight of her like a man dying of thirst. The footage will be here within the hour, he said quietly. Antonio is sending it directly to our secure servers. Isabella nodded but didn't speak. Whatever it shows, Salvatore stepped closer then stopped himself. Whatever it shows, I need you to know that I would never do what Ferraro is claiming. I would never betray our marriage that way. You already betrayed our marriage. The words hung between them, sharp and true. I know. Salvatore's voice was barely audible. But I didn't betray it with my body. Only with my distance. Only with my fear. He met her eyes and she saw something there she hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. Raw, painful vulnerability. I loved you so much it terrified me, Isabella. So I tried to love you less. And in doing so I destroyed everything. Love shouldn't be terrifying. For a man like me, everything good is terrifying. He took another step toward her then stopped. I've spent my life surrounded by betrayal. Watching people I trusted turn into enemies. Losing everyone I let myself care about. When I met you I thought. He swallowed hard. I thought if I could just keep you at a distance I could protect us both. If I didn't let myself feel the depth of what you meant to me, losing you wouldn't destroy me. And instead your distance destroyed us anyway. Yes. The single word was a confession. I became the enemy I was trying to protect us from. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marco entered with a laptop, his face grim. The footage is here. All 17 cameras the entire night of the gala. He set the computer on the coffee table. I can review it with analysts if you prefer. No. Isabella moved to the couch, settling herself carefully with a hand supporting her belly. I'll watch it myself. Salvatore sat in a chair across from her, his body tense, his gray eyes fixed on the screen. The tattoo on his neck, Il Sang Comanda, seemed to pulse with each beat of his heart. Isabella pressed play. The footage began with the gala in full swing. She watched herself arrive on Salvatore's arm, watched him immediately become absorbed in his phone, watched the distance between them grow with each passing moment. It was painful seeing her isolation documented so clinically. Every longing glance she had directed at her husband. Every time he had turned away. Every silent plea for attention that had gone unanswered. No wonder she had felt invisible. She had been invisible even to the cameras. The footage shifted to different angles as the evening progressed. She watched Salvatore and Valentina move through the crowd together. Watched him place his hand on her back. Watched her lean into him with practiced intimacy. But she also watched what she hadn't seen that night. The micro-expressions of calculation on Valentina's face when Salvatore wasn't looking. The moments when the blonde glanced at her phone, typed quick messages, checked the room for observers. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes. And then the private rooms. Isabella's heart pounded as the footage switched to the corridors behind the main ballroom. She watched Valentina approach Salvatore near the bar, watched her whisper something that made him frown. Watched him shake his head. The timestamp read 10:47 p.m. Valentina's hand moved to Salvatore's arm. He removed it. She leaned closer. He stepped back. The interaction lasted less than 2 minutes before Salvatore walked away, leaving Valentina alone in the corridor. Isabella fast-forwarded, scanning every angle, every timestamp. She watched Salvatore circulate through the gala, always in public view. She watched him return to the main ballroom, scan the crowd, looking for her she realized now, and then speak urgently with Marco. At 11:23 p.m. he left the hotel alone. The cameras showed his car departing the parking structure at 11:31 p.m. Valentina didn't leave until 12:47 a.m., an hour and 15 minutes after Salvatore had already gone. He's telling the truth. The words escaped Isabella before she could stop them. Salvatore's entire body sagged with relief. The footage shows no private interaction, Marco confirmed, reviewing his own copy on a tablet. Every moment they spent together was in public view. The most physical contact was his hand on her back during the charity announcement. But the pregnancy claim, Isabella's mind was racing. If he never slept with her, then whose baby is she carrying? A new voice answered from the doorway. Wine. They all turned to find a young man standing in the penthouse entrance, his face pale but determined. He was perhaps 30 with dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for his years. I'm sorry for the intrusion. He stepped inside, hands raised in a gesture of peace. Your security let me up when I told them what I knew. My name is Luca Ferraro. Vincenzo's nephew. He swallowed hard. And Valentina's lover. The story that unfolded over the next hour was more devastating than anything Isabella could have imagined. Luca Ferraro had been involved with Valentina Morelli for over 2 years. A secret affair hidden from both families. He had believed she loved him. He had believed they would run away together once her work for his uncle was complete. Instead he had discovered the truth 3 days ago. She was never going to leave with me. Luca's voice was hollow. She was using me the same way she used everyone. The baby, his jaw clenched. The baby is mine. But my uncle convinced her to claim it was yours. It's the final weapon in his plan. The scandal that would destroy your marriage, your reputation, your empire. Why are you telling us this? Salvatore's voice was dangerously quiet. You're betraying your own family. Because my uncle murdered my father. Luca's eyes blazed with grief and rage. 12 years ago he arranged a car accident that killed both my parents. I found proof last month. He eliminated his own brother to consolidate power. The young man's hands shook. I won't let him win. I won't let him use me or Valentina or your family as pawns in his sick game. Isabella felt the room tilt around her. The web of lies and manipulation stretched further than she had ever imagined. Decades of hatred, betrayal, murder. What does Vincenzo actually want? She asked quietly. Luca turned to face her, his expression softening. He wants Salvatore to suffer the way he believes he's suffered. He wants to take everything, the empire, the reputation, the family. His eyes dropped to her pregnant belly. He wants to destroy any chance of a D'Angelo heir. Any hope of a future. Isabella's blood ran cold. The meeting tonight, Marco interjected. At the cathedral. What's waiting there? An ambush. Luca's voice was grim. My uncle has no intention of negotiating. He's planned a very public execution. Salvatore walking into a trap, killed in a church while his pregnant wife waits at home. The scandal would bury the D'Angelo name forever. Salvatore rose from his chair, his face a mask of cold fury. The tattoos on his forearms seemed to darken as his hands clenched into fists, honor real stark against his whitened knuckles. Then we give him what he's expecting, he said quietly. A man walking into a trap. His gray eyes met Luca's. But not alone. And not unarmed. The plan came together with the brutal efficiency of men accustomed to violence. Salvatore would attend the midnight meeting as demanded, but Marco and a team of D'Angelo soldiers would already be in position, hidden throughout the cathedral. Luca would provide inside information about Ferraro's arrangements, playing the loyal nephew until the moment of betrayal. Isabella watched from the penthouse as the men prepared for war, her heart torn between terror and a strange, fierce pride. You shouldn't go. The words escaped her before she could stop them. Salvatore paused in the doorway, his suit jacket open to reveal the weapon holstered against his ribs. I have to end this. His voice was quiet. For all of us. You could die. I could. He turned to face her fully and she saw everything in his eyes. Fear, regret, love. So much love. But living without you isn't really living. I've spent the last 9 days understanding that. He crossed the room slowly, stopping just out of reach. Whatever happens tonight, I need you to know something. Salvatore. I loved you from the moment I saw you in that gallery. His voice cracked. I loved you when I married you. I loved you every single day of our marriage, even when I was too afraid to show it. And I will love you until my last breath, whether that comes tonight or 50 years from now. His gray eyes burned into hers. I was a fool and a coward and I destroyed the best thing in my life. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Come back alive, she whispered. We're not finished yet. Something like hope flickered across Salvatore's face. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away and rested his hand against her belly. The baby kicked. Salvatore's breath caught. His eyes went wide, then soft, then bright with tears he refused to let fall. I felt. Your daughter. Isabella's voice was barely audible. She's been waiting for you to notice her. The word daughter seemed to pierce through every defense Salvatore had ever built. He sank to his knees before Isabella, both hands now pressed against her belly, feeling the small fluttering movements of the child he had almost lost. I'm sorry. The words came out broken, shattered. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For everything. He pressed his forehead against her bump. I'm sorry, little one. I'm sorry I wasn't there. But I'm here now. And I'm going to make this right. I'm going to give you and your mother the life you deserve. Isabella's hand moved to his hair, threading through the dark strands the way she had done 1,000 times before the distance grew between them. Come back alive, she repeated. We have a lot to discuss. Salvatore rose reluctantly, his eyes never leaving her face. For a moment he looked like the man she had married. Passionate, present, completely hers. Then he was gone. The cathedral on Via dei Martiri loomed against the midnight sky like a monument to past sins. Salvatore approached alone as demanded, his footsteps echoing against ancient stone. Vincenzo Ferraro waited at the altar, surrounded by armed men. His silver-streaked hair was perfectly styled, his suit immaculate. He looked like a man attending a business meeting, not a planned execution. Salvatore. Vincenzo's voice echoed through the empty nave. How gracious of you to accept my invitation. How gracious of you to finally stop hiding behind your cousin's skirts. Salvatore stopped in the center aisle, his hands visible at his sides. Valentina's pregnancy is a lie, Vincenzo. We have proof. Your entire scheme is unraveling. Something flickered behind Vincenzo's cold eyes. Proof. Security footage from the gala. Every camera, every angle. I never touched her. Salvatore's voice was ice. And we have something else. Something more valuable. Oh. Your nephew. Salvatore let the words hang in the air. Luca has been remarkably cooperative. He told us everything. The fake pregnancy, the embezzlement scheme, the planned ambush. His gray eyes scanned the shadows of the cathedral. He also told us about the death of his parents. Your brother. Your own blood. For the first time Vincenzo's composure cracked. Luca wouldn't. He would. He did. Salvatore took a step forward. You killed his father. You manipulated him for years. And now he's chosen the D'Angelo family over his own name. The cathedral erupted. Marco and his team burst from the shadows, weapons drawn, surrounding Ferraro's men before they could react. Luca emerged from behind a pillar, his face pale but determined, a gun trained on his uncle's chest. Vincenzo's eyes darted around the cathedral, calculating odds, finding none. This isn't over, he snarled. You can kill me, but the feud doesn't end. It passes to the next generation. And the next. You'll never be free of the Ferraro name. You're right. Salvatore's voice was quiet. The feud doesn't end with death. That's why I'm not going to kill you. Everyone froze. Instead, Salvatore continued, you're going to live. You're going to watch your empire crumble. You're going to see your reputation destroyed by the evidence my wife compiled, evidence of embezzlement, conspiracy, and murder. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, knowing that a D'Angelo put you there. Vincenzo's face contorted with rage. And every time you remember this night, Salvatore finished, you'll remember that your own nephew chose me over you. That your carefully planned revenge ended with you alone, powerless, forgotten. He gestured to Marco. Take him. The D'Angelo soldiers moved in, restraining Vincenzo and disarming his men. The operation was surgical, professional. The work of an organization that had survived for generations by being better prepared than its enemies. Salvatore watched until Vincenzo was secured in the back of an armored vehicle, then turned to find Luca standing alone by the altar. What happens to me now? The young man asked quietly. Salvatore studied him for a long moment. That depends on you. You betrayed your family to help mine. Some would call that unforgivable. My family murdered my parents. And mine has murdered plenty of others. Salvatore's voice was brutal in its honesty. We're not heroes, Luca. We're not the good guys. We're just another crime family fighting to survive. I know. Luca's jaw tightened. But you love your wife. I watched you through the security footage while Isabella reviewed it. The way you looked at her when she wasn't watching. The way you fell apart when she left. He shook his head. My uncle doesn't love anyone. He only knows how to hate. I'd rather serve a man who can love even badly than a monster who can't love at all. Salvatore was silent for a long moment. Marco will find you a place in our organization, he finally said. But if you ever betray us, I won't. Luca's voice was firm. I have nothing left to betray. Isabella was pacing the penthouse living room when Salvatore returned at 3 a.m. She heard the door open. Heard his footsteps in the foyer. And then he was there standing in the doorway, his suit rumpled and his face exhausted but alive. Beautifully, impossibly alive. It's done. His voice was hoarse. Vincenzo is in custody. The evidence is with the authorities. By morning, the entire Ferraro operation will be dismantled. Isabella's legs gave out. Salvatore caught her before she could fall, his strong arms wrapping around her, pulling her against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding, could smell the gunpowder and sweat and fear that clung to him. You came back, she whispered against his shirt. I promised I would. She pulled back to look at him. His gray eyes were soft in the dim light, the harsh lines of his face gentled by relief and exhaustion. This doesn't mean I forgive you. I know. This doesn't mean we're okay. I know. This doesn't mean. He kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, giving her room to pull away. But when she didn't, when her hands fisted in his shirt and pulled him closer, the kiss deepened into something desperate and hungry and full of 6 years of love and loss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Salvatore rested his forehead against hers. I will spend the rest of my life earning back your trust, he murmured. However long it takes. Whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere. We need to talk. Isabella's voice was shaky. Really talk. About everything. About the distance and the silence and the way you made me feel like a ghost in my own marriage. I know. And you need to meet your daughter. Her hand moved to her belly. Really meet her. Feel her kick. Talk to her. Be present for the rest of this pregnancy. Yes. Salvatore's hands covered hers. Yes to all of it. Yes to everything. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. Isabella studied his face, the face she had loved for 6 years, through happiness and heartbreak. The face that had become a stranger's, then an enemy's, and was now somehow becoming familiar again. I want to renew our vows. The words surprised them both. Not now, she continued quickly. Not until we've done the work. Rebuilt the trust. Become partners again instead of strangers. Her eyes met his. But eventually, when we're ready, I want to marry you again. The right way this time. With promises we actually keep. Salvatore's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. When you're ready, he repeated. I'll be there. For the rest of my life, Isabella, I'll be there. The months that followed were the hardest of their marriage. They didn't return to the D'Angelo estate immediately. Instead, they rented a villa in the Tuscan countryside, neutral ground free from the ghosts of their failed marriage. Salvatore commuted to Milan for business, but he came home every night. Every single night. They talked. 4 hours they talked, excavating years of silence and misunderstanding. Isabella told him about the loneliness, the invisibility, the way she had dimmed herself trying to avoid his displeasure. Salvatore told her about the fear, the constant terror of losing her, the way he had convinced himself that distance was protection. I grew up watching my father destroy my mother, he admitted one night as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset. Not with violence, never that. But with coldness. With distance. With his complete inability to show emotion. His voice was rough. I swore I would never be like him. And then I became exactly like him. You can choose to be different. I'm trying. His hand found hers in the gathering darkness. Every day I'm trying. He attended every doctor's appointment. He felt the baby kick and watched her grow on ultrasound screens. He talked to Isabella's belly every night before bed, telling their daughter stories of her family, promises for her future, apologies for the father he had almost become. Your mother saved me, he would murmur against Isabella's skin. She saw something worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. And I'm going to spend my life being worthy of both of you. The nursery in their Tuscan villa became a labor of love. Salvatore painted the walls himself, soft yellow like sunshine. Isabella chose the furniture, the bedding, the small details that would welcome their daughter into the world. For the first time in years they built something together. The divorce papers were never finalized. Isabella withdrew them 3 months after Salvatore returned from the cathedral, on the night she felt truly safe for the first time in their marriage. He had fallen asleep on the couch while reading a book on infant development, his third such book that month, and she had stood watching him, this terrifying man who had softened himself for her and their child. She had destroyed the papers without waking him. Some decisions didn't need words. But the work continued. They saw a therapist, something unheard of in the world of organized crime, but Isabella had insisted and Salvatore had agreed without argument. They learned new ways to communicate, new ways to fight fairly, new ways to be present even when the pressures of his empire demanded attention. Valentina Morelli was tried and convicted of espionage, embezzlement and conspiracy. The baby she had claimed was Salvatore's was born in prison and surrendered to Luca Ferraro, who disappeared into the D'Angelo organization with his daughter. Salvatore never mentioned the child again, though Isabella suspected he had quietly arranged for the girl's care. The D'Angelo empire recovered. Stronger than before, rebuilt on the ashes of Ferraro's failed revenge. Marco remained Salvatore's right hand, though he now reported to both husband and wife, a change that signaled to everyone that Isabella was no longer the invisible spouse. He was a partner, an equal, a force. Their daughter was born on a spring evening, when the Tuscan hills were carpeted with wildflowers and the air smelled of rain and renewal. Salvatore held Isabella's hand through every contraction, his face pale but determined. He whispered encouragement and love. He never looked away. When the baby finally arrived, 7 pounds 6 ounces of screaming fury, the nurse placed her in Isabella's arms and the world stopped. She's perfect. Isabella's voice was thick with tears and exhaustion. Salvatore, look at her. He was looking. He had been looking since the moment she emerged. And for the first time since his mother's funeral, Salvatore D'Angelo wept openly, tears streaming down his face as he gazed at his daughter. She has your eyes. He managed. Those beautiful hazel eyes. And your stubbornness. Isabella laughed through her own tears. Did you hear how loud she screamed? Definitely a D'Angelo. Salvatore reached out with trembling hands, touching his daughter's tiny fingers. She grabbed hold of his thumb, grip surprisingly strong, and something in his chest broke and reformed stronger than before. I'll never let you down. His voice was a vow. I'll never make you invisible. I'll never be too afraid to love you. He looked at Isabella over their daughter's head. Either of you. Not ever again. They named her Lucia, light. A name for new beginnings. The vow renewal ceremony happened on their 7th anniversary, exactly 1 year after Lucia's birth. It was held in the same Florentine gallery where Salvatore had first seen Isabella, the space transformed with white roses and candlelight. Only family and close friends attended. Marco stood as witness. Lucia, now a wobbling toddler with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin, served as flower girl. Isabella wore a simple white gown that flowed over the curves of a body changed by motherhood. Salvatore wore black as always, his tattoos visible beneath rolled sleeves. Il sang Comenda, the Roman warrior, the cathedral and roses, on or real. The same symbols that had once represented his darkness now spoke of his transformation. The ceremony was simple. No grand declarations. No dramatic gestures. Just two people who had nearly destroyed each other choosing to rebuild instead. I vow to see you, Salvatore said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Every day. In every moment. I vow to choose you actively and consciously even when fear tells me to pull away. I vow to be present for you and our daughter. To fill our home with warmth instead of silence. To love you loudly, consistently in all the small ways that matter. Isabella's tears fell freely as she spoke her own vows. I vow to let you see me. The real me. Not the diminished version I became when I was trying to be small enough not to hurt. I vow to speak my truth even when it's difficult. To fight for us even when it would be easier to walk away. I vow to grow old with you, Salvatore D'Angelo, and to build a life that our daughter will be proud to inherit. When Salvatore slid the new ring onto Isabella's finger, a band designed to complement the original engagement ring she had reclaimed, he held her hand as if it were the most precious thing in the world. As it was. The reception lasted late into the night, with dancing and laughter and the kind of joy that only comes after surviving profound pain. Lucia fell asleep in Marco's arms, her small fingers clutching the collar of his suit. Salvatore and Isabella swayed together on the dance floor, barely moving, content simply to hold each other. I spent 6 years being afraid of this, Salvatore murmured against her hair. Afraid of how much I love you. Afraid of losing you. And now I know the truth. He pulled back to look at her face, his gray eyes soft in the candlelight. Losing you isn't what I should have feared. Almost losing you taught me that. What I should have feared was never truly having you at all. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I had everything and I was too blind to see it. But you see it now. I see everything. His forehead touched hers. I see the woman who saw something worth saving in a monster. I see the mother who fought for our family. I see the partner who matches me in every way. His voice dropped to a whisper. I see my entire world standing in my arms. Isabella kissed him, soft and deep and full of promise. Take me home, she whispered. Our daughter will be awake in a few hours and we have a lifetime to get started on. Salvatore smiled. A real smile. The kind she had fallen in love with 6 years ago. Forever. Forever. The D'Angelo estate looked different now. Isabella had spent months transforming it from a mausoleum into a home. Color everywhere. In artwork, in textiles, in the fresh flowers that filled every room. Photos of their family covered every surface. Lucia's toys scattered across antique rugs. Laughter echoed where silence had once ruled. Salvatore still conducted business from his office, still commanded respect and fear throughout northern Italy. But his phone stayed in his pocket during family dinners. His evenings belonged to bath time and bedtime stories and conversations with his wife. His mornings began with Lucia climbing into their bed, demanding breakfast and attention and the complete adoration that was her birthright. He gave it willingly. Isabella built a new art consulting business from home, her reputation growing independently of her husband's power. She traveled for work sometimes. Milan, Florence, Rome, and Salvatore held down the fort without complaint, video calling her every night to show Lucia saying new words or taking new steps. They fought sometimes. Real fights with raised voices and hurt feelings. But they fought fairly now, with rules and boundaries and the understanding that conflict was part of intimacy. They always made up. They always chose each other. And every night after Lucia was asleep and the house was quiet, Salvatore would find Isabella wherever she was. Reading in the library, watching the stars from the terrace, working on her laptop in the study. He would sit beside her, take her hand, and simply be present. "I used to think love was a weakness," he told her one night as they watched the moon rise over the gardens. "Something enemies could exploit. Something that made you vulnerable. And now I know it's the only thing that makes me strong." He brought her hand to his lips. "You make me strong, Isabella. You and Lucia. Everything else, the empire, the money, the power, it's nothing without you." "Careful." Isabella's voice was teasing. "That almost sounds like something a romantic would say." "I am a romantic." He pulled her closer. "I'm just a reformed one. The kind who knows exactly how much he has to lose." "You won't lose us." "I know." His arms tightened around her. "Because I'm never going to stop fighting for you. Not for a single day of my life." The night wrapped around them like a blessing, soft and dark and full of possibility. Inside the house, their daughter slept peacefully, dreaming of the safe and loving world her parents had built from the wreckage of almost destruction. And Isabella D'Angelo, who had once stood alone at a gala while her husband ignored her, who had quietly removed her wedding ring and walked away from everything she knew, leaned into the arms of a man who had learned to choose her. Every day, in every moment, with every breath. "I love you," she whispered. "Ti amo per sempre," he replied. "I love you forever." And for the first time in their marriage, forever felt real. The end. 5 years later, their family had grown. A son named Marco, named for the man who had never stopped believing in redemption, and another daughter on the way. The D'Angelo name was still feared throughout Italy, but those who knew the family personally spoke of something else. The fierce love between husband and wife, the children who were raised with warmth and presence, the empire built not on fear alone but on loyalty and respect. Salvatore D'Angelo never forgot the months he had almost lost everything. The memory kept him humble, kept him present, kept him grateful for every ordinary moment with the extraordinary woman who had saved him from himself. And Isabella, who had once believed her love was a burden, finally understood the truth. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is come back. Together.